Hello and welcome to Movie Joust. My name is Jesse Nussman, and with me on the other line, fellow Atlanta film critics, Jason Evans and Josh Sewell, fresh from the quarantine zone. Have you guys been scrubbed for your rage virus? Have you gotten your rage virus vaccines? No?
No, I heard that if you use like raw milk and lavender, that takes care of it. So.
Oh, okay. That's been approved by HHS, or the what's the acronym, the Health for America thing? Jason's
MAHA.
MAHA.
Yeah, has that been approved by MAHA?
Yeah. Are we getting political? I hope we don't get political.
Guys, very excited to talk with you today. I got a chance to see 28 Years Later, one of our more anticipated movies of the year, and the embargo has just lifted. The embargo that I don't understand why it was. First of all, why was it so late, Sony? You're killing yourself. You're hurting yourself. You should let people spread the word, because this movie rolls. It's so good. So I'm gonna open the floor for you guys to ask me all the questions you want about this. We're gonna close off with some zombie movie recommendations, but just a quick recap of this movie. This is writer Alex Garland and director Danny Boyle reteaming for a decades later sequel to their 2003 zombie horror film, 28 Days Later, which imagines what London would be like 28 days after a rage virus turns its inhabitants into basically just rabid monsters that are running around eating people. And was a jumping off point for many great actors, among them Cillian Murphy. And a couple years after that movie came out, there was a sequel called 28 Weeks Later that is pretty solid, but is more of like it's a watchable zombie movie. Like, it's a watchable, well-made zombie movie, but doesn't quite have that sort of edge that the Danny Boyle, Alex Garland original did. So it's very exciting that Garland and Boyle are back together, and we talked about this movie in our kind of like anticipation for the year episode. And Jason, you mentioned like if these guys having a feeling like if these guys are going to come back to this, like they don't need to do this. They could just get a producer credit if this was just
they're hugely successful. Both of these guys are.
Yes.
They've made some huge movies and TV series. I said the only reason to come back to this is if you have a great idea.
And let me tell you, these guys have many, many great ideas, and it totally makes sense why this movie is not just a standalone sequel, but is kicking off kind of a whole new trilogy of movies set in this time period, 28 years after this virus has decimated London. And I was a little cynical about that, but walking out, I have to say I'm really excited for where they go. And I wonder if this movie's maybe going to be divisive. I think if people don't like it, then they're normies, and it sucks to not be able to enjoy the pleasures of this thing. But I will say, Alex Garland throws in a lot of ideas about what Britain would be like 28 years after this apocalypse, how people would be clinging on for survival, how would this virus be mutating the people that have been infected by it, what is just the landscape of this nation that has now been quarantined off from the rest of the world. And Danny Boyle is going full Danny Boyle and is doing the most like punk rock, like throw everything at the wall aesthetic flexes that you can imagine. And it really excited me that this movie both feels like it is continuing a lot of the ideas that they were explored in the first movie. You know, I think that first movie is Boyle and Garland are less interested in zombies so much as they're interested in like how does a society collapse in real time, basically. And that's kind of what that first movie is about. It's about society collapsing. And then this is a movie of if society has collapsed, how does society sort of rebuild itself, and what does that look like? And it plays out a little bit almost like a medieval quest epic in a weird way, there's a character played by Ralph Fiennes who's this mysterious doctor figure that felt very Merlin-esque in a strange way. And then there's all these sort of crazy Alex Garland ideas about like, what does this virus do to these people as it is like mutating them, and what kinds of animal-like behavior do they exhibit? And it's just a nasty, visceral thrill ride that I really enjoyed, and I kind of walked out of it. My girlfriend, who loves the first one, she went with me, and we kind of looked at each other afterwards, and we're a bit like, I kind of need to sit with that a moment, because it's so kind of, I'm curious what the reception's going to be, because I think there is an aspect of like the zombie apocalypse audience that like the folks that are more interested in this genre for those like doomsday prepper indulgences, as well as the like, the cathartic violence of like mowing down our like mobs of people who have basically turned into zombies. This is not a movie that's interested in that. Yes, it's gross and violent. Like the opening scene is basically like a bunch of children being slaughtered by zombies to give you an idea of like how like just out of the gates this thing goes. But it really is more interested in these ideas of like, how do societies change and evolve, and how does the human species change and evolve? And I'm really excited for you guys to see it. I thought it was an absolute best. The floor is open. Feel free to ask me.
My first question,
Yeah.
most essential one, is if you haven't seen the first film or the second film or both of them, whatever, how essential is that to seeing this film? Or does it not matter?
I don't think it matters, actually. I think this kind of works as its own, and that's part of, I think, what kind of like threw me off a little bit is, and then afterwards having to think of like, 28 years, that's 3 decades basically. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it is a completely different world almost than the first 2 movies, which were very urban and very much in a kind of recognizable world that has just sort of fallen apart, and there's, rabid people running around attacking each other. This almost leans towards horror fantasy in some places. It is Garland and Boyle like letting their imagination take them to these kind of wild hypotheticals about what the UK would be like. So I would not say it is necessary. I would recommend, if you've never seen the original 28 Days Later, to go see it. I also think the last thing I'll mention is people haven't seen, Danny Boyle shot a lot of this movie using iPhones and iPhone rigs, and what him and his cinematographer Anthony Dogmantle accomplish here is really jarring and visceral, and like at first it like kind of looks ugly and garish, and he's putting the camera in all these weird places. It looks sort of like it has this kind of digital grain to it, but also there's this like weird immediacy to the action as it's happening, and Danny Boyle cutting in all kinds of like mixed media and weird sound cues, and it just creates this kind of like cacophonous, constantly assaultive experience that felt in lineage of what they were kind of doing with the first movie, where, if people don't know how they shot that, they basically shot it on like camcorders that you could like get at your like Walmart essentially, and that let them make this very kind of like grungy punk rock kind of zombie movie. And this feels like them kind of taking those principles, applying it to modern tech, and then going even further into like, let's just get weird and experimental with like what we do with the camera. And that's a little jarring at first, but the more I've been thinking about it, the more I like really admire the ambition, and it's like really striking.
I will say that, a little bit before we started recording, one of our colleagues, Matt Goldberg, published his review, and he went a little bit more behind the curtain of the plot in that one. He gave everybody a heads up first, obviously. And so reading that, I was much more intrigued after reading that and after hearing you than I was seeing those trailers. And it sounds like, from the outside looking in, what this is going to do is continue the conversation we were having last week with materialists. This is the horror version of the romance version of that conversation, which is the bait and switch that a lot of these marketing materials are doing with audiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. The movie that they're selling, I was mildly interested in.
Yeah.
But the one it sounds like we got, I definitely want to see.
This is definitely like less Walking Dead or Last of Us, if that's the vibe you were getting from the trailers, and more closer to like, some of Garland's other, like Annihilation or like Sunshine or some of the like crazy, but it's closer to like Annihilation or Devs than I would say it is to like Walking Dead or the Romero zombie movies.
It sounds like there might be kind of like some Green Knight in there too.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really clever idea for basically say that would the UK basically reverse back to being in kind of the Middle Ages, and this does become kind of a quest movie of this boy and his father, or then at another point in the movie, this boy and his mother sort of traveling across, leaving their safety net and traveling across this kingdom where there's all these different dangers, and really just sort of like setting up like all of these kind of different kind of communities that characters could come into contact with. It's rare I leave a blockbuster movie like this kind of being like, oh, I'm excited for them to make more of these.
Now, that was one thing I wanted to ask, if you can get into it without spoilers, obviously.
Yeah.
Is this a movie that when it's over, you feel like you've had a start to finish experience, or is this one where it's leaving you hanging and we're just crossing our fingers and hoping the next one gets made?
Both. I would say there is a closure of some sort that happens with the main boy character in the movie. But then there is, the final scene of the movie is basically kind of then sort of guiding you and saying like, okay, now here's how we're going to continue on this journey. And sort of like, so kind of wrapping up one arc, but then sort of saying like, we will likely continue with these characters in the future.
Cool. Well, based on what I'm hearing about this weekend, I don't think we have to worry about that. It sounds like they're going to make the next one. So.
Yeah, I mean, the next one that Nia DaCosta is directing, but Garland has written. Right. Yeah, that is already in production, I'm pretty sure. Or like they're done shooting it. And then Garland has a script for a third one that Boyle said he will come back to direct. Cool. So I believe the next one is next year. It's coming out. Like they're almost done with it, from what I understand.
Right, they're trying to get these, out in a reasonable amount of time so that you catch lightning in a bottle and you don't let it go.
Which is smart, because I do, we talked about this in our preview episode. Like there is a kind of like millennial nostalgia anticipation for the return of this movie, and like it being a series that Hollywood has not burned people out of, and it's exciting to see that it is coming back, not as a very familiar zombie trope, but something potentially weirder and maybe more divisive.
Nice.
Well, look, Jesse, you said Sunshine and Annihilation, and I'm like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's all I need to know.
I really look forward to what you guys think of it, because it does get kind of weird and doesn't totally explain some stuff that you gotta kind of be like, I mean, I know they're making more of these. They gotta like dive into like future stuff of, and it really is a movie that leaves you wanting more and wanting to sort of learn more about this world, because everything in it is so fascinating. As well as
so Jesse, wait,
yeah.
But is this largely for horror fans, or is it more?
It would be weird if you like did not like horror movies and went and saw this, because it's pretty violent and visceral and bloody. So I would say if you're cool with like if that's not your thing, I don't know why you would be interested in this movie. You should probably stay clear of this thing. So, any final questions before as we wrap up? We were going to give some zombie movie recommendations. So if this just wasn't me mansplaining Danny Boyle movies for 20 minutes on this podcast.
I got nothing to add, man. You sold it pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Go
I was on the
see
fence,
it.
and you got me.
I was nervous with the embargo breaking late, because usually that's a sign for in our industry that if not the movie's bad, then the studio is a little unconfident in it and was a little nervous going into it last night, and then got to the end of it, was like, oh, it's weird. That's why. And then I think that's all I texted you guys last night, was like, it's weird, but I enjoyed the weirdness. So let's talk zombie movies. Jason and Josh, what to you makes a great zombie movie, as well as why do you think people love zombie movies? Why do you think we get so much delight out of watching our fellow man turn into a bloodthirsty monster and having to beat them to death with a crowbar?
I think we like zombie movies because we like seeing the people who figure out a way to survive against everyone else. Because that's largely what, I mean, every zombie movie is a whole mess of people, a horde, thousands and thousands of people are up against you. Now, they aren't going to be as smart as you are. They may not move very quickly, but they are unstoppable. And you, and by you, I mean the hero of the movie, has to figure out a way to survive in that circumstance. And I think that's what it's a tribute usually to ingenuity and cleverness and things like that on the part of the heroes, because they're facing literally everyone else.
I think they appeal to a lot of people because they're such a simplistic villain or antagonist, let's go with that it allows you to kind of spin them into pretty much any metaphor that you want. So the zombie gets to stand in for a lot of stuff depending on the movie. And so, I think the freedom to, insert real bad guy here is really rich for filmmakers as well as audiences, where you can have people watching the same movie and come away with like 10 different interpretations. So I think it's the malleability of the genre that keeps it kicking,
Yeah, they're great, I think, as you mentioned, like for allegories, and they're great to kind of like the zombie, there's always like the joke of like the zombies are us, and doing those kind of like simple readings of it. But guys, what are, let's go through some like favorites of this genre. I've listed some down, you guys were listing some down. Maybe we can compile like a rough list for people, and I'll throw it up on our Instagram. But is there, let's focus just on horror right now. Jason, I know you're not the biggest horror guy. Josh, I don't know how you feel about spooky pictures, but I feel like I'm the one that's always like telling Jason about some depraved thing that I watched. He's like, that's not me.
I'm not a huge fan. I think I probably watch more than Jason, but I would not call myself a diehard of the genre.
So
no pun intended.
Worth me asking then, because probably the best place for our conversation to begin is Romero, who really is like the godfather of zombies and kind of invented this genre. And there's his kind of very well-known iconic trilogy of Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead, fun, but I think not quite the Titanic pillar instant classic that like those other two are. Right. What are you guys' feelings on those movies? Have you seen those movies? Do you agree with kind of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead as like really the giants of this subgenre?
There's no list without those movies, especially the first 100%. One, because Romero is the first filmmaker to use the zombie as a way to sneak that social commentary in an era where that's going to get you blacklisted. So especially with the way that movie ends, spoilers for a 60-year-old movie or whatever, but really the ending that hammers home like who the real bad guy is.
And then Dawn of the
don't
Dead is
get-
this whole like satire about like consumerism and this
Consumerism,
idea of
yeah.
like we have to hide away in the mall. That's where we'll be protected, and the zombies are lured to the mall.
And the 2004 remake by Zack Snyder has the same kind of themes inside it.
Yeah.
I actually think that the Romero films from the 60s and the 70s a little bit harder to watch in a modern climate.
Even Dawn of the Dead is unfortunately kind of just like hard to watch, period. Like, are you guys aware of like the rights issue with that movie? How like the rights to there's like some dumb rights issue where the guy who owns it like you can look it up. It has to deal with him making a 3D version of the movie, and then like no one wants to release it, and then he's like holding on to the rights. But like that one's unfortunately like just hard to find, period, unless you want to like go through illegal means online.
So again, the Zack Snyder one from 2004, I think carries many of the same themes, and it's just you guys are absolutely right. It's super interesting to have this bad guy who's so simplistic that you can put other themes on it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I wish I'd said that as my reason that the zombie films are so great. That is exactly right.
And speaking of the Snyder one, like, I mean, hot take, like, or is it lukewarm take? Dawn of the Dead is still Zack Snyder's best movie.
I agree. I think it's the only movie of his I like. Truthfully,
I don't think
300.
And
sorry, I think 300 is his best movie, but it's up there. It's close. I like 300.
But
I like 300.
I don't think it's an accident that the most thematically interesting Zack Snyder movie was written by James Gunn. So
that's right. I forgot he wrote that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any other like horror versions of this subgenre that you guys are like really attracted to? There's one that I caught up with today doing like a little bit of homework called Wreck. That's like a really scary 2006 2007 like found footage zombie movie where this like TV reporter and her cameraman are like trapped inside this building under that the residents are turning into zombies and they're like quarantined in there and can't get out. Really like viscerally upsetting, brutal movie.
And I'm sure you want to clarify that you're talking about the actual Wreck, not the American remake, right?
Yes. Doesn't the remake have like a different title or something like that?
Yes, but I think it's
called like Quarantine maybe or something like that.
There's like a lot of ripoffs and remakes, but
which
is another characteristic of the zombie genre. Tons of ripoffs and remakes.
Right, exactly. But do you guys have any other like horror shout outs? That's one that like immediately came to mind if I watched that today and was like, wow, this is up there 28 Days Later is like one of the like true scariest additions to this subgenre.
That's what I was going to say is just the OG 28 Days Later is terrifying. And I know like people that are more hardcore genre experts than me are arguing, well, that's not technically a zombie movie. But like 28 Days Later is a zombie movie. Like and
I'll tell you that the one that everyone talks about, and I have not seen it, I have no desire to see it, but everyone who's into this genre says Train to Busan, is a Korean film,
an
is supposed to be absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, and I'm embarrassed to say I have never seen it, but maybe I'll rectify that this Halloween.
Me too. Yeah.
What about zombie comedies? Because I would say this subgenre is just as
I love zombie comedies.
Plentiful of like great silly spooky movies as opposed to like really visceral horror movies with ideas. What are some of you guys' favorite like zombie comedies?
I mean, it has to be Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead are both just amazing. They're so much fun. It's not a comedy but a rom-com, Warm Bodies.
Yeah.
Oh, never seen it.
It's good.
Warm Bodies is basically Romeo and Juliet with zombies. And Romeo is a zombie who sort of by falling in love with Juliet begins to come out of his zombiness. It's by the way, great cast. Check out Warm Bodies.
Nicholas Hoult.
Yeah. Nicholas Hoult he's really good as a zombie.
The thing that I like about Shaun of the Dead is the fact that like, yes, it's a zombie comedy, but like there are parts of Shaun of the Dead that are genuinely scary.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Genuinely like horrific. Like it isn't like ha ha ha, look at the people getting bitten. Like you really feel for these characters, and Edgar Wright doesn't shy away from the terror of the genre.
Yeah, that movie also just has like such a great joke at its center, which is like if a zombie outbreak happened in like suburban UK, like everyone's so kind of like mild mannered and polite that like no one would notice for hours and be like halfway through the day until people started noticing. A couple other like comedy ones that I wanted to bring up that I'm curious if you guys have seen. There's Dead Alive, also known as Brain Dead, which is an early Peter Jackson movie actually, but I would say is less Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson and closer to the kind of like Looney Tunes splatterfest of like the Evil Dead movies. But a really fun, wacky movie. I would maybe say don't be eating as you watch it. I remember it being a pretty gross, a lot of like pus. You know what I mean? A lot of just like bubbly bodily fluids and like squishy kind of gore effects. Then there is Return of the Living Dead, which is a 1985 movie directed by Dan O'Bannon, the guy who wrote Alien and Dark Star. And it's a pretty funny, like, what if punk rockers encountered like zombies in the middle of the night? And it's this kind of slapsticky, cartoonish, fun movie. Jason, I think like you would love this, like knowing your kind of it's in your wheelhouse of like 80s stuff, and then the kind of like silly zombie humor that you like. It's that perfect melding of both, and like it's a little bit Repo Man, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I think those are the only do you have any other recommendations for this genre?
Speaking of horror comedies, you were talking about Peter Jackson and Brain Dead. I want to throw out 2006's Black Sheep, which is a horror comedy also from New Zealand about zombie sheep, which is gross and hilarious, and it's clearly inspired by that era of Peter Jackson. It's more like an homage than an actual movie. And then I was going to throw out some like horror zombie comedies with an asterisk where like we can debate if these are actually it or not. Cabin in the Woods, the Drew Goddard, Joss Whedon thing.
I would not say
Cabin in the Woods is not a zombie movie.
It's as much a zombie movie as it is like a werewolf movie, in that every monster that's ever existed makes an appearance in that movie.
And then you've also got like, is Evil Dead 2 zombie movies, or those more like demon movies?
No.
That's a fair question. I don't know, but if anyone hasn't seen the Evil Dead movies, then please.
What are you doing?
Yeah, please solve that immediately.
And I know, super controversial opinion, but I'm much more of a Evil Dead 2 person. I'm much more the Looney Tunes kind of Sam Raimi than I am
I think 2's the best one.
Yeah. No, I like 2 better than 1 also. I like 2 better than 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. What are you guys' thoughts on World War Z, which is one I've been thinking about as I like went through the zombie lists and was like, yeah, no, I definitely saw that. Weird that happened. I feel like that movie has like no cultural legacy for how big that book was, and I kind of remember like I was maybe in like high school, college when it came out, and so like I was the target audience and I aggressively did not like it. But I wonder what you guys has thought about that one.
So I read the book, and the book is so much better than the movie. The book does a great job of taking you to different places and having you understand how different societies, different people, different cultures dealt with a zombie apocalypse. The movie tries to do that by having Brad Pitt go all over the globe, which doesn't really work all that well.
It's like they go to Morocco and it's like the scientist, he's dead, but there's someone else in Madrid, and then they got to go there, and it's like, but then there's someone else in Iceland, and I also kind of remember the PG-13ness of that as maybe someone who whose traumatizing zombie experience was watching 28 Days Later, probably a little too young, like was like hashtag not my zombie, where I'm not with this bloodless zombie.
Mall. I remember liking the sort of globe-trotting espionage. I remember liking Brad Pitt as an action hero, and thinking CGI zombies are not scary at all.
Yeah, so the things I like about it, I liked the Jerusalem segment, especially this notion that you get 10 people in one room, and if they all agree on something, it's the job of one guy to say, well, wait a second, what if what you all agree on is wrong? And that's the reason Israel is the only nation around that has a solution, even though their solution dies because they let people in, the people make noise. And anyway, I just thought that was an interesting concept. And I did like the ending of World War Z. The idea of the way that they defeat the zombies. What's that?
I don't remember the ending, so you're going to have to...
the ending's really cool. So they end up at a CDC, not a CDC, but a World Health Organization facility. And Brad Pitt has sort of figured out that the zombies aren't interested in you if you are sick, if you're really sick, like if you're dying. They're only interested if you are someone who can help spread the virus. And if you're dying, you can't help spread it. And so Brad Pitt goes out into the facility and injects a lethal virus into himself, but a lethal virus that there is a cure for. And as a result, the zombies won't attack him because they think...
Yeah.
And yeah, I just thought it was a clever... First of all, it was an interesting way of explaining the zombies to some extent and how to defeat them. Mm-hmm. And like I said, when we started this whole conversation, I think, the clever, how do I get past this unbeatable horde is one of the things that I think is really interesting about zombie movies and World War Z. And by the way, that solution is not in the book. They made it up just for the movie. And I think it's just a really interesting solution. And and there's some very tense scenes toward the end there as Brad Pitt is unsure whether he's immune or not.
So the last one I want to ask you guys about that kind of fits with World War Z as like one of the few examples I can think of like zombie movies as blockbuster, which is I Am Legend, which is a movie.
Not a zombie movie.
No, you don't think that counts?
No.
Okay.
They're absolutely not zombies. So first of all, they're not mindless. And one of the key attributes of zombies is they are almost always brainless automatons who are focused on one thing only. And the whole point of I Am Legend is that the bad guys, the night crawlers, whatever the heck they call them, they got some name for it, night seekers or something like that, that they are not brainless. In fact, at one point they trick him and they're functionally going to capture Will Smith. I can get into a whole thing about the ending that as to whether or not the zombies are really have a society and that maybe human society has gone away. But to me, they are more almost vampire-ish kind of. Remember, they're sort of afraid of the daylight.
I was going to put my English nerd hat on and say, when you talk about the book being better, the original Richard Matheson story, you can go back and read it, and it's clear how the movie totally butchers the book. The book...
Oh, it's awful.
They're clearly vampires. Like, they are absolutely, unquestionably vampires, and they're also not just, like, intelligent. They're like vampires in other movies, like, Sinners vampires or whatever. They talk, they communicate, like, which they don't do in the film. And the title doesn't make sense for the movie when you change the plot.
That's right, yeah.
And so it's definitely not a zombie movie, but it's also just not a good movie. I know, Jason, you said you kind of had a soft spot for the alternate ending, but that's not canon, so...
Yeah, the alternate ending gets a little bit closer to the message of the book, I would say.
Not even a little bit. It absolutely... The alternate ending, I think, captures the point of the book, which is that the character that Will Smith plays in the book realizes, wait a second, I'm the monster. Yeah. I'm the one, destroying this society. And in the movie, he realizes this. In the alternate ending, he realizes the same thing.
We'll be extra curious now to hear your thoughts on 28 years later, because there is a little I Am Legend DNA going on in this movie, particularly I Am Legend the book. Some ideas going on with this movie. Well, guys, do you have any other zombie movie thoughts or recommendations? Or I don't know, maybe you want to talk about Will Smith catching L's lately by just like admitting again, like another movie, another classic he turned down.
Speaking of bad movies.
He apparently has poor script reading ability because
change his
the stuff that he has that he admits to have turned down. Yeah, it's great stuff, and he didn't do any of it.
Well, yeah, sure, he didn't do The Matrix, but we got Wild Wild West out of it, so that's cool.
That's very true. Yeah, I'm trying to
God.
that would be a fun experiment. What are the other movies that like Will Smith did instead of Matrix, Django, and Inception? That'll be my homework for tonight, is to like look up what those are and text them to you guys.
By the way, do we have it confirmed that he was going to be in those? I mean, we all heard about Django. Django's, we've heard Django for a long time.
Yeah.
Jamie Foxx owes Will Smith a whole huge debt of gratitude.
The Matrix stuff is confirmed, and he is the one who's admitted to the Inception stuff recently.
Yeah.
I mean, bad choices.
I don't think I would have said that out loud. I guess like once you've got a ton of money, you're cool with admitting your mistakes. But I'm like, you would have had a whole different career, man.
Well,
by the way, speaking of Will Smith's career, he's not even really doing the acting thing anymore. Right now, he's on a tour of Europe doing music stuff, like singing Fresh Prince songs.
Big Will.
Yeah, you should check out. Yeah, he's got a new music video. He's dropping new singles. He's trying to get the song of the summer.
Yeah, that's not a good look for a Hollywood A-lister a decade ago.
Well, guys, this has been fun. Everyone out there, be sure to also check out our other review this week that has a lot more Jason and Josh talking. It's on the Pixar movie Elio, which they saw and I didn't. And next week, I believe we're going to talk a little vroom vroom. We're going to talk
we all saw it.
A little F1.
F1.
Yeah. Maybe a little Mathregan. You guys going to go see Mathregan with me?
The daughter, who is usually too cool to go to screenings with me now, has already told me that she's my +1 for M3gan 2.0.
Hell yes.